Welcome back, everybody, to the first Open Game Data Office Hours of 2025, I guess. Um, so this is a quick reminder of the Open Game Data community. We're an NSF-funded research incubator, bringing together a collective of researchers interested in the use of data generated in and around games to advance our scientific understanding of thinking, learning, and decision-making. And we have two primary goals here. One is to compile a bunch of resources and best practices and how to use data in this kind of space. And then two, eventually build some real hard research infrastructure that helps and kind of encapsulates a lot of those best practices into systems and code people can use to do their work more easily. We have a bunch of different resources that already exist. There's the Open Game Data website, hosted by Field Day Games. There's the Open Game Data Slack, where we congregate to discuss ways to get involved. And there's these Open Game Data Office Hours, which is what this recording is and what these sessions are, where we provide sort of a set of working examples or discussions around ways to do this kind of work. So how these sessions work, they're inspired by a series of sessions that the Statistical Education Research Group used to do at CMU, where a student would get help on some complex problem they were working on, and a faculty member from the stats department would help them out. And it's kind of grown beyond stats at this point. We are kind of more, here's a thing I'm working on, and here's the community kind of jumps in and pitches in with an idea. So some things to keep in mind: the presenters are often showing work that is in progress. So take that with a grain of salt and recognize that it can take courage to do that. Our goal here is to help the presenter make progress and achieve their goal, but also these sessions are about learning for everyone involved. So if you have a question or something you don't understand, feel free to raise a hand, chime in, and ask. And with that, I'll hand off to Maurice, who will be hosting this week.
Awesome. All right. So just to let's actually do this. Presenter view. All right. Yeah, so first off, thank you for having me. So today, to give context for those that don't have it, but most of you should, next week is going to be the Learning Analytics and Knowledge Conference in Dublin, Ireland. Really looking forward to it. First time in Ireland. Obviously bummed that some of my friends can't make it, but we're going to make the most of it. So what will be happening is I'll be facilitating this workshop. So what I've done is I've pulled together some slides to facilitate that workshop. So a little caveat, like a couple caveats just to kind of like contextualize this. I haven't gone through and like done my like rehearsing of the slides. So the presentation of it's going to be really casual right now, as I anticipate the workshop will be, but just yeah. So there's lots of likes and ums and uhs, and as I'm still processing. The other thing I will say is that almost all of the activities are baked in and ready to go. I think there's one activity that I still have to go through and flesh out. That's gonna be the last one. We're doing like an affinity map activity at the end. So I still have to like work through the specifics on that, but everything else, if there's feedback to be had, please go ahead and jump in and let me know. I am okay and would almost prefer if you have feedback at the moment, feel free to just go ahead and jump in and let me know. I have got my little notepad up here to the side, so I'll go ahead and just jot that down so that we can just capture it when it comes up. All the links should work, so if you even want to like test out the links, you're welcome to do that too to kind of see what's going on. I think with that, we can just go ahead and jump in and see where we end up. So I would be presenting this. My name is Maurice Booth Jr. at New York University. I'm facilitating the game-based learning analytics workshop here at LAC 25. I will be sending this in advance so that folks will have an option to actually complete the little exercise beforehand. So getting started with the welcome. Just want to do a quick shout out to my fellow organizers, folks that have given me feedback, insight, and supported along the way. Obviously, many of them cannot make it, and for that, we're sad, but we will catch them here soon. Oh, also, if any of these pictures aren't good, let me know. Right, so. So what I do have is I have a little bit of an icebreaker that we'll end up doing. So this is just a little Miro board. What I did is I did an example one, and I put some of these questions on here, like just a hey, give us a picture of your pet. What's your role? What's your favorite place? Contact info. Is there a game you're playing right now? Just because it's a workshop, we want to know who's in the room. I added a song. This is my background right now. This is the Bryant Park Library, the Rose Reading Room here in New York. Good stuff. So what we'll do is we'll end up going through. They will have time either before having like seen the email or in the first few minutes before the workshop starts to go ahead and do that. I think we have about 11 or so registered. So it shouldn't take too long. We'll just do a couple minutes to kind of go around the room and figure out who's who and what's what. All right. From there, I did get feedback to remove this picture because it doesn't make sense. And I dig that. But this is the agenda for today. And that is we're going to do some background. So these are just some initial thoughts and considerations as it relates to learning analytics and games. We'll have an opportunity for sharing out. So we have a handful of abstracts that were submitted for this workshop. So we will have those presenters briefly share out on their abstracts. We will also then turn things to the rest of the attendees for them to share out on things that they may have observed or things that are priorities for them so that we can kind of capture all of those ideas. We will then have a short break, and then we'll follow that break with a brief analysis of a handful of educational games actually supplied by the folks at Field Day. So y'all will be seeing a handful of your games actually in this presentation. We're going to be doing some analysis of them. After which point, we're going to be doing a synthesis. So after having had a good chunk of this workshop to kind of explore and engage and try to like make sense of the ways that learning analytics in games is implemented, we'll have an opportunity to have like an affinity map of collecting those ideas, priorities, concerns, questions, remarks, and I have like a bit of a card sorting activity that we're going to do for that. After which point, we will wrap up with a couple deliverables that folks are able to opt into as they are interested. So jumping into some background. So this section is something that I want to flesh out a little bit more. I have like 2 or 3 additional ideas that I just want to add slides for to kind of give more context. So here's a couple of them to get us started. The first question I'm really posing to the group is how do we best use learning analytics in games? That's not to criticize saying that we're not doing a good job. That's not to critique and say that like we aren't getting some incredible insights from using learning analytics in games, but just asking this really ideal question of how do we best use them? And that kind of takes me to my next thought, which is a paper that I had written for the Joint Conference of Serious Games. We basically offered a definition of game-based learning analytics with 2 fundamental principles. The first one is that game-based learning analytics is the use of educational games as 1, the source for learning traces that can be ultimately analyzed and evaluated for a player's learning process. Now, this is kind of like a no-brainer. I think this is like where we're already doing a lot of it. But just to say that the game itself is what's providing us these learning traces. We're not it's scoping down from like, for example, like wearables or from like more multimodal stuff just to kind of like scope it down. The second thing is that it is also the vehicle for providing embedded and contextualized analytics to the player to actually make meaningful decisions in the game. Now, this second point is where things kind of differ in a lot of what I've been seeing within the learning analytics community, where you might be having these analytics till you like delivered to you outside of the game, or you might have a report that's being presented. Now, there are obviously examples of it showing within, but this is kind of like really concretizing, saying we're looking for these two things within this definition.
Can I ask a couple of questions about that?
Yeah, please.
So you're specifically here looking at player facing as opposed to teacher, parent,
Correct.
whatever facing. So it's analytics that goes to the player. So that's kind of
Correct.
your inherent audience base, I guess. And you're
Exactly.
suggesting here that it goes through the game itself and not around it?
That is correct.
Okay.
Mm, Just crazy idea. Sorry, David, are you saying something?
Yeah, I was gonna say you seem totally aware of it. Um,
Yeah.
but certainly in the kind of frameworks that I operate under right now, game-based learning analytics would break out like to the player, to designers, to researchers, to
Mhm.
teachers, to, and you're like, we don't even know if there's more than that, but that would be the landscape. And I
Yep.
would consider your definition being, this is the part I'm interested in. And
Got it.
and in that regard, I would maybe think of like game-based learning analytics player edition versus,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
Yeah.
I would if that
Or
really is your passion, it's like go with it, but know
Yeah.
that it's part of I would consider part of like a collection of other places.
yeah. Or like player-centered game-based learning analytics, and then you
Yeah,
just go into
Yeah.
like a massive polysyllabic
or even as you put
acronym.
it, it's like game and embedded or embedded game-based learning analytics or something, like
Mhm.
I'd play
Yeah.
around with adding something else to the definition game-based learning analytics. Yeah.
No, and I love that. And this is why I'm so happy about this conversation because obviously like I'm really close to this. So my mind just kind of spins on it. I obviously am aware of the context and I actually addressed that context like further in the presentation. Um so I think just the way that it's going to be packaged and presented as like, hey, we're looking at this particular slice as part of this conversation. Thank you for that. Anything
Yeah.
else?
I'm also kind of curious what you kind of mean by contextualized there. Like, do you
Yep,
mean,
totally.
is it like diegetically contextualized to the game world? Is it about their like, yeah, context is one of those annoying words in,
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
playing with that too, like
analytics and HCI
philosophically,
that
if
mean a
it
billion
becomes
different things.
if it's 100% contextualized, then it is just the game. So it's like, at what layer do you peel back? Because it's like
Yep.
games are providing feedback and all that, and they're giving you meta-analysis of your performance. So you're like,
Yeah.
fully contextualized would be actual game mechanics and feedback systems in the game. And then you're
Mhm.
like rolling back a little bit and saying, well, when is it analytics in the for this community?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think the intention here is I'm what I'm hearing a little bit is I could probably add a couple slides to kind of like preface this and kind of like set up this definition and kind of like scale it down. Because it's exactly your point. When I'm thinking contextualized, I am thinking about we aren't just necessarily removing a player from like the game experience in order to deliver analytics and feedback. Now, how do we do that? That's one of the questions that I'm interested in exploring. And again, this is just like one perspective. We're going to see who all's in the room because I'm sure they'll have different perspectives too. Great, awesome. Anything else on this? This is great.
I think I'd keep going just to make sure we don't get too bogged down.
Yeah. So the example, so this was just like in an analysis and lit review of 151 works where we were seeing exactly what you were describing, where almost nearly all of them were for educational researchers, designers, teachers, administrators. That's who the analytics were serving in this review. And then those that did have something student facing, there was 4 of them, and it was specifically presented as a dashboard or a similar visualization. Um, and the thing that I was trying to like push on is, okay, if we wanted to deliver analytics or feedback to the learner in the game, how should that appear? And then again, I'm going to contextualize this by saying, hey, this is just like my kind of like big idea, the thing that I'm thinking about that I'm bringing to the table. And then when we switch over to the abstracts, we'll see what other things that either those presenters or the other folks in the room are going to be bringing as well.
Yeah, that was a question I was about to ask is like, is this meant to be your introduction to the entire workshop, or is this essentially like your abstract share out?
This is kind of like my abstract share out.
Okay. You
Got
might
it.
want to have some kind of
Yeah,
signposts in there early on to let people know that you're doing that.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, good feedback. I second it.
Love that. But yeah, so then the closing thought on that would be, you know, what GBLA is and is not, and maybe we put like the asterisk of like, in the way that I'm kind of presenting it is collecting and analyzing learner data during the intervention. It is delivering feedback and analytics using the game itself, and it's primarily intended to support learner decision making as part of that experience. And what it's not is it's not after the intervention. It's not using an external tool to ultimately deliver that feedback or analytics. And it's also not it's not primarily intended for teachers, administrators, researchers, and designers. All right. And at that point, then I'm more or less done talking. And then we kind of like flip it over to the workshop folks and see what emerges from those conversations. So at this point, we would flip over to share outs. So we'll start with the abstract share outs. So we have a handful. So Annie will start, then Ewan will start, we'll follow up. Now for these, because of the condensed time, like we're not doing slides, or if we're doing slides, they're doing like 1 or 2 slides because it's like a 5-minute presentation. And we want to kind of keep it more informal and keep it cruising. I am open to feedback on that. I've had folks reach out to me that's like, well, I prepared some slides, and I'm like, so I'm kind of like going like either way on that. But at the same time, I just want to be mindful of like, we only have a few minutes to kind of like have this abstract share out. And then there's probably gonna be a few minutes for just Q&A of those topics to make sure that like we have a combined understanding.
Probably too late now, but a format you could consider would be like a Pechakucha style thing, where you get, I forget exactly what Pechakucha's official process is, but it's essentially you get like 5 slides and they auto advance.
Oh, sure.
and that is how much time you get to talk. It works pretty well for these kinds of like fire hosey. We want you to just go quick.
No, that's fun. I've not actually seen that. I think I've heard of it, but I've not actually seen it myself.
Yeah. I think it's typically like 20 slides for 20 seconds each is the usual format.
Oh,
but
wow.
academics often flex it because it's really hard to talk over anything for 20 seconds. You usually need something a little longer, or if you're going to show any plots, like 20 seconds is usually not enough. But
Sure.
Yeah. I think making things move really fast and giving people ridiculously small amounts of time can be really playful, because
right, and that's another thing you see.
It just has to be so, it has to be so totally dumb, like that you have to explain some big complicated thing in 3 minutes or whatever, and that makes it fun again, because it's like
right.
So another trick I've used or seen used is if you can have a timer that's counting down and like have it visual with a big loud sound, then you can kind of create a culture of everybody like booing or clapping or something, you know, to like really move it along every time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it
We
can
do
just
another
keep that
thing.
playful. Yeah.
We do another thing here during our orientation or our open house for PhD students called 4-Minute Madness, where all the faculty present on like their lab or their work for 4 minutes. And then a thing we started is we got a big gong. And we gave it to the PhD student, like the PhD students locally, and they like aggressively keep time on the faculty, and it's kind of a fun flip of roles.
That's awesome.
It's just celebrating the ridiculous lack of time.
Yeah,
but it does help if people like I would do. But this is what, in 2 days or something like that.
Yeah, it's on Tuesday.
So you generally do need a little bit of lead time to prep for that kind of format.
Well, and I think what I'm and just off of this feedback, what I might invite folks to do is, because like I said, I've had folks reach out to me, say like, hey, I was preparing some slides, and I was like, just be mindful, like we're only gonna be dealing with like 5 minutes, so you're talking like 2 or 3 slides. And what I might follow up with them is like, hey, we'll give you a slide. Like, so you have at least something that you can put up on the screen so you can reference. But that's
essentially like a poster.
Yeah.
Like a digital poster. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right.
I've got one more comment on that.
Yeah, please.
And that is that you think of the purpose this plays within it, and it's effectively an introduction.
Yeah. Oh, you muted.
You hit mute, Dave.
Sorry. So I was saying, if you think of the purpose of this thing within the larger event, it's basically your intellectual introduction. Like you did the icebreaker to kind of like get to know each other a little bit
Mm,
personally, but this is the like, what do I want to talk about? Why am I here? Basically.
yeah.
So you can also give folks a little bit of a framework to say, make sure your slide answers
Mm,
these three questions, which is like, what kinds of games or data are you working with, and what kinds of analyses or purposes are you doing it for? And then one of the big ones is like, what do you want people to come and talk to you about? And what are you looking to talk about while you're here? What's missing in your work that you're looking for collaboration? Or so I don't know what those prompts are, but that can be really helpful to guide people to be like, make sure you address these things because they're gonna give you the most value out of this instead of digging
yeah.
into a bunch of stats or something. And it's like no one's gonna
Yeah.
the real
That's ultimately like really my goal is like, because I do want to keep it as collaborative as possible. Like if we go too deep into any particular project and then we're then the workshop's over and then
yeah.
yeah.
I looked at a table, like I looked at 27 tables, but didn't
Right.
get any new big ideas. Yeah.
No, I like that. Thank you. So just moving this along. So we have I think it looks like one, two, three, four, four that are going to share out, and then from that point we're going to pivot to the attendees that are going to share out. And all I did is I just gave them three questions, like just in their work, what have they observed, what have they struggled with, and what did they find helpful. Really just broad questions so it can apply to their work in whatever ways is meaningful, it makes sense to them. And again, with the intention of kind of like building this community of like, ooh, have these different things that we're thinking about, and we're all kind of connected to this in a similar way. This could use something a little bit more if there's any insight, but otherwise, I think it's sufficient. Any quick thoughts on that?
I think you just need to have like some kind of blank to fill in there. So like what have you observed about using
Mm.
GBLA, building it, interpreting it? What? Maybe you leave that open to people, but like as kind of a suggestion, how to fill in the blank
Okay.
might be helpful.
All right. Awesome. All
You
right. So
also might get some people, which I think we got at our own LAC workshop, that had never worked in games before and they were just there to be curious.
Yeah.
And they would probably struggle to answer some of these
Yep.
questions.
Just drop. You know that there's going to be some group of people that's like, well, I was here before, so I don't know. This looked the most interesting.
it's like it said game. It said game in the
Yeah.
title, and I know what games are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wanted to see what you were all up to.
Exactly. All right, then from here, we have 30-minute break, which feels like a long break, but at that point, like we're about an hour and a half, 2 hours into the workshop. So they're gonna go have their coffee and they'll eventually make their way back. And then from here, we basically have two activities to kind of wrap things up. The first one is I was basically gonna put I think it's Wake, Lakeland. Like there are four games here. You can actually like click on it. And it's just a Google Doc. And I just have a series of questions here of just them going through the exercise of identifying the learning objectives. Fortunately, with the field day games, like we do, like y'all do such a good job of like explicitly saying like in the documentation, like these are the learning objectives. So just kind of giving them a few minutes to come up to speed with that, and then asking. And these are the questions that I've kind of like framed like in the context of like my like pseudo abstract. And I think that with the feedback that we've had, I might want to try to like open these up a little bit more. Maybe there's something else that jumps out at them. Um, as opposed to like kind of like burying the lead a little bit. But the intention is here. They're going to analyze in what ways learning analytics is implemented in these games. How might they do it differently? And then ultimately just a brief share out. So basically we have these four pages for each of the games, and then, yeah. So I'll pause briefly if there's any insights or feedback on this guy.
Nice
Are
work,
you
Maurice.
expecting to play the game for a bit?
Sorry, I heard two questions at once.
Are you expecting them to play the game for a bit?
So because we only have like 5 minutes, the hope is that they're all gonna kind of like, one will probably look at the site, one will probably read the documentation, one person might try to play the game. That it like because they're gonna be like groups of like 3 or 4 that are gonna be doing it. Um, Knowing having played like the games, like even like during like the LAC workshop in Arlington, it was like you can spend 20 minutes just playing the game to like kind of like get into it. The thing that I really like about the way these games are presented too is the fact that we do have that like short little 30-second to 2-minute trailer, so folks can actually get into seeing gameplay pretty quickly to at least start getting a sense for what might be going on. Any other thoughts?
I do. Give it just a second though.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Or actually, can you just share the link in chat? That's great.
Yeah, okay, so the high level thought would be, I think these kinds of activities are really helpful, and they're generative too. And I think one of the things that we've noticed in workshops is that people have a widely varying ability to get into this. Like some people will that are experienced will like get into detailed like right out of the gate within minutes. They just engage with these kinds of questions and go for it. And other folks will just completely freeze up and just really not know how to like, but this is a learning analytics group, so you think there's a little more, but something about games and stuff, I feel like we've just witnessed the freeze up a couple times. So I would just kind of plan on being able to facilitate around that, and maybe even pair, like suggest that people pair people that have done games-based
Mm,
stuff with people that haven't, or um, model it potentially, like what it looks like when you're explaining it, like give
mm,
some prompt, like give like the Cliff Notes version of what you would do for a game and how you would think through these questions.
sure, sure. I'm always a fan of modeling.
Yeah,
Just like from like a teaching perspective, like, oh, there's so many things you can capture by like, oh, this is more or less what it might look like.
this is what this is what your conversation should sound like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So y'all have the document in the chat. If anything else like emerges for you, feel free to either drop a note in the chat or jump on in. After which point, so we'll have that analysis activity, and at that point, and then this is the activity that I still need to flesh out a little bit more, is having like this affinity mapping activity, which is, again, we have another Miro board. And then the idea here is we'll go through a handful of steps. This, I might actually end up, like I was starting to put some stuff in here, but I might actually leave that open based off of the conversation and having folks populate it themselves. But the thing I'm most excited about is actually Miro has, I've done this activity with a couple, like, it was kind of like a needs assessment, but basically what was really interesting to me is there is this private mode. So what we can do is we can actually say, hey, you have 5 minutes. I want you to write down as many like things that excite you about game-based learning analytics, things that worry you, things that you've seen, things that you have questions about. And then you just, by turning it into private mode, what'll happen is all those cards are basically hidden. So you can see the cards being produced, but no one else can see them. Then after that point, you then have this grouping exercise of like, all right, we're starting to see patterns emerging. Like, wow, everyone in here is starting to see that we have this similar concern, and kind of breaking them up into different groups that way. Then we have like themes and established, and then ultimately we would end with like a prioritization of sorts. So this is the one activity that I want to flesh out a little bit more. The intention here, the product is a here's the culmination of thinking of folks in this room, and the ways that we've kind of organized our thoughts and the ways and that the kinds of the questions, prompts, priorities that we are left with after this conversation. So that is this intention, but like I said, that's the last thing to flesh out for me here. All right. Then to wrap up, that is going to kind of like get towards the end of the workshop. At that point, we're doing a wrap up. I would talk about the 4 things that I started at the beginning. So we're talking about like community of practice specifically. Like I have a website up, like we're going to have some emails. I specifically want to plug the OGD, the Open Game Data group, because y'all have been phenomenal. And I think a lot of these folks are going to be interested in that too. I'm going to give them more specifics on the abstract expansion into a short paper. I ended up getting some details on that, so I'll make sure that's communicated. Also, the next steps for creating a special interest group, just so that folks that are interested in games have a community specifically within solar that they're reaching out to. And then ultimately, for those that are interested, maybe we take the product of this workshop and start iterating on that towards a position paper for JLA or a similar venue. And with that, that's all I've got.
Wish I could be there.
You will be missed.
Sounds like the kind of stuff I like talking about.
I didn't know that solar had SIGs.
Yep.
That's interesting.
What's the process of making a SIG?
That's the thing I have to like dig into a little bit. I think it's just submitting a proposal to like the solar executive board. I'm actually like the student representative on the solar executive board, so I've been getting like interesting insights into like how solar works, which has been really, really cool. So it really doesn't take much to have a formal SIG.
Yeah.
There's apparently a Google form that you fill out.
Yep. Yeah. But if there's any other questions, comments, feedback, that is everything I have for today. You know?
For some of the other stuff, so you mentioned expanding to full paper to a short paper, or what's the plan on that?
Yeah, so the general process, and like I need to like write it down so I can actually see it written. But if I remember correctly, it is March. No. Don't quote me on this. I think it's like April 4th, but anyone that had submitted an abstract basically can expand it with the feedback and insights from the workshop to a short paper of, I think it's like between 4 and 5 pages.
Is that affiliated with LAC, or is that going to go?
It's a CEUR.
Okay, yeah.
So basically there's a group that is already doing like a combined proceedings for the workshops at LAC, and they said, oh, it looked like you were accepting abstracts. If you're interested, we would invite you to participate. So I was like, oh, cool. As long as we have this opportunity and timeline to expand it. And they're like, it looks like that's going to be fine. So, so we basically have a timeline. We have like a small group of folks that are going to be vetting them before they end up being like published in those proceedings. And yeah.
Cool. And then you were mentioning, can you bring that slide back up actually, I
Sure.
guess.
The next step slide.
All the other next step stuff.
Wait, where's my
We
screen
have a
share?
mailing list for open game data, by which I mean we have a spreadsheet of email addresses, not an actual mailing list. So we could merge with that if that's what you're thinking about. Or are you thinking of creating your own separate one?
I'm really not, like, I don't really feel strongly like one way or another. I like, the thing that I'm mindful of is there space between like the things that I'm thinking and the conversations that are happening in this workshop and the work that's happening in OGD? Like, I think that there's a synergy 100%, but I just don't know. Like, so one of the things that I'm considering is for LAC, for like just like within solar, anyone that's like submitting a games paper, like I want to make sure I'm talking to those folks, right? Just because you're literally doing work with games. So like in that sense, it's like which I like, so that's why I'm like, I don't know where like one ends and the other begins, but I'm not really persuaded one way or another. So if you have any insights on that too, please let me know.
It's a fun conversation because I don't know, as like a computer science background person, like I always think in hierarchies and data structures and stuff, right? And this seems like one of those obvious times where there's at least two obvious hierarchies. One of them would be there's people that are doing stuff related to education with games and game data. And inside of that, the second order thing would be, and they're doing it at LAC and EDM and these other communities, right? The other way you could orientate would be solar is the thing, and it's people doing learning analytics, and then people that are doing game analytics are one thing within that. And my instinct has been there's not enough people within any one of those academic communities that are doing stuff with game data to have a snowball. There's always like three, like every academic conference, like there's like two, three, you can go to any one of these communities. Like for example, for the qualitative ethnography group, it's like Jen plus two other people are just like rocking it right there. They're like the games people there. So my instinct is that the hierarchy should be that we try to organize everybody around games and data, and then think about like the sub communities there, because in total then we've got like 50 people maybe in the world that are really
Yeah.
maybe it's like 50 if I had to just gamble. But it's just enough to like have it's just enough where if it's at the individual communities, it's just not enough to ever move.
Yeah. And I think that you bring up a good point there. And which is why like I think that the most fruitful option, at least within this workshop, is going to be the special interest group, because of exactly what you're saying is like the thing is there's always someone that's doing like learning and games and data within solar. There's always, like you were saying, there's always like 3 or 4 papers that are submitted. Like it still trips me up that they don't just have like a games category when they're like doing the paper presentations. They kind of like split them out all into like different talks, and I'm like, I don't know, that doesn't resonate with me. But for me, I want to make sure like they should all be talking to each other, and I want to be talking to all of them.
Yeah. I'll make one other case for organizing above the solar level, or at a different, the way I was suggesting is that if we can pull together the 50, maybe 100 researchers like worldwide that are really doing this work, we're going to get tens of millions of dollars to support that work. If everybody is like doing their own thing, we aren't going to get tens of millions of dollars to do that work. Everybody's going to just keep on doing their own thing. So it's another one of those like arguments where I think if we can show that there's a critical mass of people that are talking about these things and having breakthroughs and writing papers and doing innovative work, and we can show that critical mass is large, that's when we're going to get large support.
Now, this might be just like a small semantic question. Now, is the way that you're thinking, is that like under like an OGD umbrella, or is that under a separate umbrella? Like what is that? What does that hierarchy, or like does OGD subsume like I guess I just can't quite get that straight in my head. I didn't even like articulate a question there. I just like expressed general.
In my mind, yes. In my mind, the mission of Open Game Data is actually all game data research folks. That's been the scope of it. It's anybody doing anything with games and data. And the part that's been maybe more contested is it only learning or not? And that kind of, and I think if anything, that the place that I've personally settled on that is it's anybody doing anything with games and data that's thinking about the mind, psychology, how that plays out. But the funders that we currently have are probably, at least in the research side, are more concentrated on educational games and not doing fundamental psychology from like commercial games. So in my mind, that is the mission of open game data. And in a way, there's a liability because we put the word open in there. And that's kind of a misunderstood idea. So I think when I think about open game data, what that means is it means open science, and that means easy in, easy out. It means modular stuff. It means sharing. It doesn't mean, I don't know, the other things that open can mean necessarily, but it means open science, right? So it's like an open science version of game data, which is a literally inviting of all people and in all parts of it. And again, sharing work in progress and sharing things that can be replicated and all that. So in my mind, that is the purview of that initiative. And outside of the commercial versus educational game issue that again comes down to funders, the other one is it US or international? And that also just comes down to funders. Like it's international in reality, but some of the documents that we write will talk about US because we're going to US funders. So we highlight that. But even on that note, like the level of funding we're talking about assumes it's international, right? Like even though it's a US funded project on the South Pole, it's like, well, of course there's 70 countries involved. So so I think in that regard, I'm definitely trying to build momentum around the open game data community and these meetings and such as like a center that we add to. But when I think of like the relationship of a solar SIG with that, I'm like, okay, that's exactly how you build momentum, is that
Yep.
you support things like SIGs getting formed at different. And how to do that now is a matter of like whether or not we want to think about like where our intellectual kind of home base is. And I don't know how to think about that because I know that there's a huge draw to be like, no, solar is my home. Or if quantitative ethnography is my home. Those are my people. And not a meta topical thing that, you know what I mean? That's hard because like
Yeah.
this doesn't give you anything for your career other than if we can align this community like across all those, we'll get crazy amounts of resources because funders will see that we have some organization.
Yeah, and honestly, I think your kind of like re-clarification of open, because that was really helpful to me because I didn't actually understand it in that way. I did understand it more in like an open source kind of like terminology, as
Yeah,
opposed to
that's
like
because they're confused because I do open
yeah.
source and I'm like really into that, but open science is different than open source.
Right. So
Open source
I
is
think that term
part of
open science feels good, and that actually, yeah. So honestly, I think for the community to practice, then to me it feels right and true to like plug folks into that while also plugging folks into a potential special interest group within solar. Like
Yeah.
those feel like the two bodies. Also, I'm personally not interested in managing like a community of practice of like I like coming to these meetings and supporting y'all. This is
Well, we'll
great.
hopefully hire people to do this here. That's like, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Jen, did you have a thought? I felt like you were
Yeah,
like,
I was
ready.
going to just build on what you were saying because I think that there's some value considering how like yes, we all want to be under the same umbrella, but how the needs of different strands of scholars may be different based on like what their specific area of focus is. So to use me, for example, as the quantitative ethnographer of the group, I am the weirdo that uses the raw log data. Like I very rarely use features. I use the legitimate like transcripts because I'm creating connections between temporal context. Like that's important to the types of models that I make. And so like because of that, it shifts kind of like where my focus is. And I'm thinking about my office mate is Yeyu, who is also running a LAC workshop this week or next week on transmodal data analysis. And like, yes, her home community is quantitative ethnography, but they also have a like transmodal SIG, I think, as part of LAC. That it's not all people who do quantitative ethnography, but it's people who like have similar problems in of practice of like, how do we actually work with this data? And so the more that you can cultivate those like subgroups to have a like common goal or common understanding, because what I would worry about is actually if we have this larger group where it's anybody doing like anything related to psychology or understanding users or player behavior, like the way that somebody in HCI might approach modeling is very different than somebody in like this community would approach modeling, right? And like being able to showcase that it's not just this broad group, but like we have these particular strands, it turns it in from like a blob into more of a complex spider web.
Yeah. Gosh, okay, I love this conversation, and I have a couple responses to it. So one thing to note is like Erik and Maggie and I are putting a book together where we're going to be inviting people to run chapters. And what's interesting about that is again, the theme of the book is game data. And again, this kind of game data as it relates to learning. So one of the chapters, for example, is learning science of games. We'll be inviting someone to write that. And when I think about the chapter breakdown, one of the set of areas we talked about was like modeling single players, and then one of them was modeling groups. And it's like, even within modeling single players, when I hear you talk, this is kind of helping my little org chart in my head come together a little bit, because I realize that temporal analyses have several directions of going, right? And then like session compressed or player compressed features have several ways that they can go, right? And I don't know if I've broken, or thought in my mind even like broken out the methodological basis of those. So it's funny because like from a like our technical infrastructure that Luke and I have been working on, we've really prioritized the idea of like basically being able to do A/B tests and statistical analyses, right? We've just prioritized that for various reasons. Probably because it's safe and kind of well known. But the idea that you would start with like the raw events, and that those then would make their way into other agreed upon and communal analysis pipelines that would spit out other things that aren't features that like we are doing right now, just 100% makes sense. And I keep trying to find all those parts because we're literally proposing like technologies that will enable people to collaborate on those kinds of things, where Google Colab and just doing it your own way for your own paper that one time isn't the only option, right? That will always be a primary way that things happen, but like where are the synergies, and trying to define those is it's fun to find them. But I wonder if this conversation, maybe to summarize what I just said, I wonder if this conversation around thinking about the academic communities and the SIGs within them that are pointed towards games in any way or using game data in any way might give us a methodological hierarchy that we could use to better inform the architecture that we're proposing.
Yeah, I even just thinking about your discussion of like modeling an individual, like one of the things that I grapple with all the time, being advised by both Matthew and YJ, is modeling to describe versus modeling to assess.
Or
those are two very
predict.
different use cases.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, that's right.
I wonder if that's a section of the book.
Yeah, because you really think of like what a model does in this case. Like we get a bunch of data and then we do a bunch of analyses and then we get some model, right? And it's like, what are the possible shapes of that model?
Well, I was thinking more that like you could have a section of the book that's like, what's the QE perspective on this? What's the solar perspective on this? What's the
got it.
perspective on this? What's like...
That's great. Because that's what we want to bring to NSF and say, look, we've got like hundreds of researchers that are going to hop on board if we build this shared thing. Like, here's all these academic communities that are all that all would be enabled to do their academic community kind of stuff if we have increased shared infrastructure.
And it would also help us inform what we actually need to build.
That's right. So, and us to understand what the heck we are.
Both makes a more compelling funding argument and is also informative to designing the actual thing. So
Funding, writing proposals as a form of identity development. I'm thinking of Jesse now too. I'm a caricaturize some of the things I've heard from her too, and it's like there's this whole other stream which really you could kind of say is industry, but it's just modeling is really focused on in like improving the design in measurable ways and demonstrating that improvement, and that's very different than some of the things that you were talking about, like informing the player with real-time learning analytics or modeling a player to describe or assess. And you're like, nope, we're looking at like the game is the thing that is being investigated here.
Yeah, if to just jump in, and I apologize, I've been very split attention. I have a big deadline, so I wanted to listen, but I've also been working on other things. But
I get
yes,
it. Awesome.
yeah, when you had said that first initial, that's what my +1 in the chat was about, was like when you were like, oh, it's about the game. And I was like, well, I feel excluded because we would almost, just the type of games that PBS Kids does, I'm not sure that we would be trying to give player feedback in that way. Like we just don't make games that are designed to be played for so long that such a thing would be useful, I think. We might change things, but right. I mean, and we're dealing with preschoolers. So like, let's be real, very different. But it was right. So like that was my like, whoa, what are we talking about? Because yes, we are trying to understand how we can improve learning from the game. And that doesn't really necessarily mean we have to give the player something, but it is understanding from our perspective, like what are we doing that is helping kids learn? And how can we optimize and get people to do more of that, whatever that is that's helping the kids.
Yeah. And Jesse, if I could just real quick, I love that you brought that up because I recognize like I have blind spots, and that's also like why I like so appreciate y'all's feedback. I'm a former high school teacher, so like when I think about like learning, I think about it in like a more like adults or like a more mature learner, like where like self-regulated learning is like they're using all of those processes. So when folks start talking to me about like like preschool or like young children, like my brain just like doesn't compute. So I appreciate you bringing that up because I think that's going to be an important qualification in pretty much anything I say.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I've been working with the PBS Kids game data for 3 years now, and it still blows my mind a little bit of like how preschoolers are interacting with these games or not, or what they are able to do even with very little information. Sometimes like it's very different. Preschoolers do not think like adults think. Surprise.
Thought. Thank
Yeah.
God, right? This is good. Maurice, thank you for like prompting some really great discussions.
No, and thanks for having me, and thanks for the feedback and the support. And yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, again, I'm gonna be bummed to miss y'all, but I think it's I think that this is a good step forward, and I'm really looking forward to it.
That's great.
Yes,
Closing thought is like definitely feel comfortable pushing people. I just updated the Open Game Data website to push to office hours and to the Slack.
Cool.
And even like you could even create a channel in that Slack for Slack or for this workshop if you want.
Love that.
And I think we have it's probably on the office hours website a form for signing up for the Slack.
Yeah, that's how it's set up right now. There's like the site right now pushes to both
but also if you just want to straight up share an invite link with your attendees, that would be easier because then we don't have to look at responses to a form and invite people.
No, and invite them to present their work at this thing too. And
oh yeah,
get it recorded and just share like
that's perfect.
We don't have anybody scheduled for the foreseeable future right now, so but we are gonna the plan going forward for this semester so far at least is gonna be, unlike previous times where we would cancel sessions if they didn't have a booking, we're just gonna have an open session where we'll just have a more informal discussion about whatever people are doing at the time. So these will happen every other week.
Every other week,
going now. We're not going to cancel them randomly on short notice. So you can feel free to subscribe to the actual calendar. And keep them going. That said, I probably will miss the next one because of that aforementioned 4-Minute Madness event where I will probably be presenting a project. So I might make sure that either Dave or Luke or somebody has co-host rights to run the Slack or run the Zoom
Yeah,
on
good.
off.
I'll be doing it remotely from another conference, was my plan. It's like a conference on psychoanalytic theory, though, so I'm going to be kind of in and out.
So if I can jump in real quick, so I will have to go as I have to finish packing my bags because I fly out tonight.
Nice.
So,
Yep, sounds good.
thank you all so much. Again, and I if you end up like keeping this recording, feel free to share the link. If not, that's also fine. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Right.
All right, bye y'all.
But